Let's talk about body image. Women are often so disempowered through their bodies because there are all of these insane societal standards about what a woman's body should look like. It started with things like models and movie stars, but now, in a way, it's even worse because now we see it constantly on social media, where people that seem much more human than models and movie stars still look like models and movie stars. And so we hold ourselves to that expectation. And it's just an impossible expectation to live up to. The good news is that people are starting to become more aware of this. And so a lot of like fitness influencers and things like that are starting to actually show like what their bodies actually look like when they're not like, sucking in their stomach or whatever for videos. But it is still a huge issue. And it's absolutely brutal what this sort of thing can lead to. It can lead to things like body dysmorphia, where you can't see your body how it actually looks. Your mind literally starts to distort how your body looks to you because of all of the pressure that you are under to look a certain way. It can also lead to things like eating disorders like anorexia or bulimia, where either people just won't eat or people will eat and then throw it up afterward. These things are on the extreme end of the spectrum, but on the slightly less extreme end of the spectrum are things like diet culture, where people will essentially starve themselves or become completely obsessed with things like counting calories in order to make their body look a certain way. It can also lead to an incredible amount of negative self-talk and negative self-perception. Things that you'll say to yourself like, I don't deserve to eat, or why are you so fat? And it can be incredibly damaging for your mental health. So, I want to talk about eating in a healthy way because I think that a lot of times what happens is people will try eating in these extreme ways in order to lose weight, and sometimes they will, but then almost inevitably what happens is that when they stop eating that way, their body goes back to the way that it was. And so it can be this vicious cycle where then when your body goes back to the way that it was, you beat yourself up for going back to the way that you were, and then you start to starve yourself again, and it's just this vicious cycle. And this isn't just something in your head, there are also biological reasons for this. So your body has something called homeostasis, which means that it tries to maintain itself. So an easy example of this is temperature. We sit at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit as human beings. And when we go out in a colder place, our body heats up in order to keep us at 98.6. And when we go into a hot place, our body cools down in order to keep us at that temperature. So for instance, when you're in a hot place, you will sweat to bring your temperature down. When you're in a cold place, you will shiver to warm yourself up. And the same kind of thing happens with our eating. So if we start to starve ourselves, our body goes into starvation mode where it says, okay, we need to save every little bit of food that we get and store it as fat because we don't know when we're going to eat again. And so then what happens is then once you are off the diet, you may lose weight, but once you are off the diet and you start eating regularly again, then your body starts storing everything as fat in order to try to get back to where it was before. The body does not do well with big sudden changes all at once. It does much better with slow, steady, gradual changes. Another important thing to keep in mind is that a lot of people have this conception that the only reason to work out is to change how your body looks. And that is actually not what working out is for. And I think that if working out, the main reason that you do it is for aesthetic, you're almost always going to run into problems with that. The primary reason that people should work out is to be healthy. And that is not just for their body, it is also for their mind. Working out helps your brain to function better. A lot of the mental health concepts that we talk about in this course are actually supplemented and helped by regular exercise. And some of the best exercise that you can do are things like yoga, tai chi, qigong, because there is actually a lot of scientific evidence that shows that those kinds of physical practices have better clinical results than things like normal stretching and exercises. So when it comes to eating in a healthy way, we want to eat in a healthy way that is also sustainable. There are a few categories that I think are useful to think about when you're trying to do this. We want to start helping you to eat in a way that makes you feel empowered rather than small. The first thing is to prioritize eating protein and veggies. Protein helps to build muscle, and the cool thing about building muscle is that it both literally and metaphorically empowers you. Metaphorically, because having muscle is correlated with being strong. And so in building muscle, you are building yourself up as a stronger woman. And you are allowing yourself to take up space in the world rather than trying to be as small as humanly possible. And from a scientific perspective, having more muscle on your body raises your base metabolic rate, which means that because you have more muscle on your body has to naturally, passively burn more calories. Some women get worried that if they build up too much muscle, they're gonna end up looking like muscle mommies, which, by the way, ain't nothing wrong with looking like a muscle mommy. But what I will say is that if you don't want to look like a muscle mommy, building up that kind of muscle has to be done very, very intentionally. And so if you just focus on reaching like certain amounts of protein per day, it is not going to result in you being a muscle mommy. The reason that we also focus on vegetables is because fiber is just generally really good for human beings, and it does all sorts of things with like canceling out sugars that enter your system and all sorts of great things like that. That's actually why like fruit is good for you, even though it has sugar in it, is because the fiber of fruit helps to cancel out the sugar. The next thing that I want you to focus on is drinking water during meals and also having water accessible to you at all times throughout the day. So I have this big water bottle that I keep next to me all the time. And the reason that I do that is because when something is more easily available to us, when there is less of a mental barrier to getting something, we are more likely to engage with it. So for instance, I'm kind of thirsty right now. And then the reason that you want to drink water while you are eating is for a couple of reasons. The first is that it will actually slow down how quickly you eat, which means that you will be able to more naturally gauge when you feel full. And the second is that it will help to keep you hydrated and encourage you to drink more water. When it comes to slowing down how quickly you eat, another thing that can be really helpful is chewing your food really thoroughly, more than you think that you need to. There have been studies that show that by chewing your food thoroughly, you actually get more of the nutritional value from the food. And then again, by chewing more thoroughly, it helps to slow down how quickly you eat, which allows you to gauge how full you feel more accurately throughout the eating. Next, I want you to focus on adding healthy in rather than taking unhealthy out. This is a really well understood concept psychologically when it comes to addictions, but for some reason, we just don't think about it when it comes to food. So most people, when they are trying to like lose weight, they go on a diet, which is nothing but cutting things out. And what we have found through science in addiction is that that does not work. If you just try to cut off someone's addiction, the likelihood of relapse is way, way higher. And so instead, what you have to do with addictions is you have to substitute the addiction for something else. So for instance, if smoking gives you a social outlet where you're able to connect with people because you're going out for a smoke and talking with people, having some other way in which the person can connect socially can help them to stay away from cigarettes. And the same thing is true with your eating. So rather than just trying to restrict yourself more and more, it is actually much more important to insert more things into your diet that are like good and healthy for you that will help to substitute for the unhealthy things that are in your diet. So again, focusing on things like protein and veggies, and it also transitions very nicely into the next thing that I want to talk about, which is organizing things by category. So things like protein, fiber, high carb, fat, those kinds of categories can help you to prioritize when you go out to a restaurant to eat, rather than having to bring a scale with you and measure out exactly how many calories you're eating of something at a restaurant. Instead, you can just look at the sort of general categories of things. So if there's something that is, high protein, high veggie, maybe you choose to eat that over something that is, super high carb, super high calorie. So if you start to follow these ways of eating healthy sustainably, I think that you'll start to notice a difference in your relationship with food. When it comes to things like body dysmorphia and eating disorders, these are things that are pretty clinical in nature. And so I would recommend, if you are struggling with something like this, going and seeing a professional because they are sort of the most qualified to deal with it. And so I would recommend talking to someone about it. But I will also say that I think that there are some little tricks that you can do that may help in little ways as you start to, go on this journey. So, one thing is that if you struggle with body dysmorphia, letting someone else be your mirror can be really helpful. Because again, your mind has some sort of filter on it that is making you see your body in a way that is distorted from reality. And so, by getting external feedback from people, it can start to help to retrain your mind to how your body actually looks. Now, what is important in that process is that you pay attention to the resistance that comes up from your mind. So when somebody says to you, wow, you look great today, you look beautiful today, and your mind comes up with resistance of like, no, I don't, they're just saying that, starting to question your mind a little bit about like, hey, like, where is this coming from? What is it that is making me think that I don't look good today? And in doing that and starting to understand that better, it will help you to start to be able to accept their view of you and change your own view about your body. The next one is sort of odd sounding, but the idea of it is that it helps you to start to notice the distortions that your mind is making when it comes to body dysmorphia. So the idea is to play peekaboo with yourself in the mirror. And each time that you play peekaboo, try to cognitively change how it is that you're viewing your body. So you hop into the frame of the mirror and you see yourself, and you may see yourself in a particular way, and then you hop out, and before you hop back in, just take a second to try to change the way that you are thinking about your body and hop back in and see if you can see your body differently in that moment. And in doing this, you start to be able to notice the distortions that your mind is making about your body, and it starts to break down those distortions because you become aware of them. And finally, in addressing the negative self-talk, we're going to use a lot of the emotional processing tools that we talked about earlier in the course to help you through this. So we're going to hear it out and understand where those beliefs come from. When you are saying awful things about your body, you want to start to question, like, where did I learn to believe this about my body? And then as you start to understand that better, then you want to start to validate it. Hey, I can absolutely understand why you feel this way about your body because XYZ factors. And the final thing is to start to vocalize your negative self-talk with other people. So when somebody gives you a compliment on how you look, saying, hey, I really appreciate that, and I feel like I can't accept that compliment because I don't feel good about my body. And this does a couple of things. One, it gives other people an opportunity to help you through this process. And the second thing is that it also gets the negative self-talk out. The more that we hold something in, the more that it gains in power and builds up. And so by letting it out, it helps to decompress it.